This country has gone through dark times before. There have been plagues. There have been Vikings raiding the countryside. There have been world wars. I've heard you speak at length about the IMF bailout in the 1970s, how you believe that we may be approaching something similar coming up. In terms of where we sit as a country today, the United Kingdom today, where does this sit in terms of the darkness of times gone by? How is it the same? How is it different? How does it compare to the dark moments of times gone by?
Well, I think in some ways it's worse. I mean, I made the repeated comparison with the 1970s and Margaret Thatcher. Indeed, the resemblances are in great detail, and we needn't go into them. It's particularly striking if you look in terms of the Conservative Party, because one of the reasons that this happened is that in 2010, when you might have expected an incoming Conservative government to look back at what had been done and to say this is dreadful and that it needs undoing, in fact, politicians like David Cameron and arguably, I think, still worse, George Osborne, said, oh, it's lovely, let's do more of it. And so the crass judgment of the web turns out to be right. There really is a uniparty. And it's a uniparty which has ruined Britain, and hence the extraordinary surge in the polls of reform. But there was a Thatcher back in the 70s. There was Keith Joseph. There was the Centre for Policy Studies. There were very serious people. I see far less sign of that now. Now, what we've got to hope is that perhaps Farage will grow. Now, I think Farage is a remarkable individual. I think that he has shown an instinct and an understanding, which is truly impressive. On the other hand, he's never shown anything like what that even more bizarre figure, Donald Trump, has done. He's never shown that capacity to act, to seize. And one of the things that's most impressed me this year has been Trump, in many ways, mad, and I'm not sure I can get on with him terribly well. But those things are completely irrelevant. He's shown a monarchical capacity. There you've actually got a politician, and it's virtually unique. I mean, you had one or two. You had people like John Howard and Abbott, who actually, for example, on boats, did something. They said it will stop. And precisely, everybody having been told from Trump that there was nothing you could do about the Mexican frontier, it stopped. Now, that's deeply impressive. I've never got a sense that Nigel had that capacity. But he will, the terrible thing is, supposing, and it is now likely, the opinion polls are consistent, reform is now creating, and it's doing it from scratch, and it's making mistakes. Of course it's making mistakes. If you look back at the Tory and the Liberal parties, the Conservative and Liberal parties, 19th century, they made mistakes when they were trying to set, and the Labour Party at the beginning of the 20th, when they were trying to set up organisations. But it is growing at an astonishing rate. I am not a member. I remain a member of the Conservative Party. I will be speaking in reform, Conservative associations and whatever. I'm struck by the seriousness, the energy, the involvement of the members. It's profoundly impressive. But there's a terrible risk. It could be Trump 1. It could be another Liz Truss. And it won't be forgiven. For it not to be, of course, there has to be, and it is beginning, and there's some signs of this, but it will require immense energy. It will require immense self-discipline. There will have to be what people like America First, what individuals like the Stephen
Miller.
Gone out of my head. The Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen
Miller.
Stephen Miller, sorry, it's problem of being aged. Every so often proper names go out of one's head. Stephen Miller, that extraordinary moment at the Trump's actual inauguration. You remember those very, very swift scene, very quick swearing in the rotunda, very different from the extended ceremonies that traditionally took place outside the Capitol, and then that immediate move into the Oval Office. Miller looking, I think, extraordinarily like a modern version of Thomas Cromwell, behind Trump as a kind. You can see the resemblances to Henry VIII, another big orange man. But what was he doing? That great pile of executive orders.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, one of the institutes that's working on the likely program for an incoming reform government in this country, I actually met individuals who'd been in America first, including one man who'd worked on one of those executive orders. And he told me how it had been done. One man working for years on one of those orders, stress testing them against entire teams of lawyers. Because remember, reform will face the whole of that blob, all of those 444 quangos, that entire legal structure. The civil service, the BBC, the bulk of the media will all be determined, the Bank of England, determined to do it down from day one. They need to look at what was done to Liz Truss. They need to learn that lesson. They need to be ready. I'm afraid I don't like using words like coup, but the only way the French Revolution was stopped were by a series of coups in which you cut this thing off at the knees. And we will require I hope, a democratically powered one, a democratically empowered one. But it will have to be, there's that wonderful phrase in the Bible that you have to be as meek as doves. That's the democratic endorsement, and as wise as serpents. And we need the wisdom of the serpent. I'm afraid we probably also need the venom and the teeth and the coils of the serpent as well, because that blob will not give way lightly.
As an aside, I know for a fact that Tony Abbott will be listening to this interview, so I'm sure he'll appreciate that little nod. You've pretty much answered what was going to be my final question, so I'll reframe it slightly from whether or not either a re-energised Conservative Party or Nigel Farage can take on that blob to you are, David, you're still wonderfully sprightly, but dare I say probably closer to the end of your life than the start. Do you hold out hope for the United Kingdom?
Thank you very much. I keep my coffin next to the table. It's a very reminder of mortality. I try it out. Do I feel the silk linings entirely comfortable? I replace the pillow from time to time as the rheumatism catches you.
Very, very, very stoic. Do you hold out hope for the United Kingdom?
I don't know. How can one say? I mean, I know what I do, and I know why I've decided to do it. You're right. I am in what is almost certainly the last decade of my life. I could be very agreeably frittering it away in comfortable retirement, or indeed I could be writing books and learned articles, or I could be listening to opera, or I could be doing 10,000 other things that I enjoy. But I decided that one has, I'm going to use really old-fashioned words, a duty. There's a duty to try to do something. There's a duty to try to waken people up. And there's also something else. One of the things that's gone very badly wrong, and this again I think will offend people, is what I call a feminization of our politics. Values like caring, compassion, now they're important. But finally, that's not what states are about. Finally, I'm afraid you do need some of those old masculine virtues. You do need, above all, courage. And that you need something else, Well, I'm aware, obviously, I'm a historian. I'm aware of how England, Britain, there's this extraordinary term, ethnogenesis, the making or birth of nations. Nations don't simply happen. They're also conceived, they're developed, there are key individuals. And you go into somewhere like Westminster Abbey, or indeed into a little country churchyard, or into the National Portrait Gallery, and you look at them, and you walk past them, and you think of what they did, they thought, they said. And I wouldn't mind a place there. I think ambition, I think that awareness of ancestors, of present, of futurity, these are important. They matter. I don't want to be the last. I'm just back from Italy. As you wander around Italy, you're so aware of those ends, the ends of Rome. I was wandering in Herculaneum, Pompeii. As you wander through Pompeii, or as you go, as I did, to the wonderful archaeological museum in Naples, you wander into a gallery. They've taken frescoes off the walls. They're mounted. There's a tiny little section, on painting, the art of the painter in the ancient world. And it shows a painter who happens to be a woman, sitting elegant, palette, brushes, easel. It shows the equipment, differential dividers, the understanding of the art of perspective. Do you know what? It took us 1,800 years to recover that. Things die. I don't want to be at the dying fall of our own civilization. I think there is a chance to fight. The Muslim hordes were resisted at Poitiers. They were turned back. They were turned back in 1688 at Vienna. It can be done. It must be done. Or at least one should try.